Here we go again. It's Mikey here and Geordie Matt. Hello, Dad.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so in the spirit of jumping around all over the place, we're going to do not my granddad Eddie, or a bit of him actually, but also his father and Eddie's brother, who I never met, called Robbie. So,
Right.
Dad, do you want to kick off by telling uh, the stories you heard about Eddie's dad talking to
Right.
Eddie?
Well, Eddie's dad, Marshall Barron, came from Brampton outside Carlisle to North Shields, Northumberland, and he worked as a coal trimmer. In those days, there was lots and lots of coal still being shipped from Newcastle to London, and it had to be loaded and stored properly. And these wee men with shovels would have to level the top of the coal off. Anyway, he married and he had two sons and three daughters. But he was a very, very strict father. They weren't allowed to go to dances or shows. They had to go to church every day, twice a day, morning and afternoon. And he discouraged them from having boyfriends and girlfriends. They just weren't allowed. So Eddie, when he finished school, he did rather well at school. He was put in an office, which was good them days. Working class boys never got jobs in offices, but Eddie did. His dad, Marshall, got him a job in a shipping company because there's loads of shipping companies there in the time in North Shields. And then he hated it because he discovered electricity and wireless, and he'd made a homemade wireless system. And while he's working in the shipping office, he kept coming across requests for radio operators. And the company was involved with Marconi, because this was a great new thing. And then he discovered there was Marconi was setting up a training school in South Shields, just across the river, to train people to be wireless operators. So he had a huge row with his father. His father agreed to let him go, but he could only go in the evenings. He did an evening and weekend thing. And he went for 3 years and he passed out as a radio operator, and which upset his dad an awful lot.
Really? So his dad sounds like a stern and proud man.
He
So
was he was very
can you now?
strict.
Uh, so Eddie was my granddad. He was a big man, wasn't he? He's a very big
He
man.
was, yeah.
And tell
I could
us
tell you a bit
about
more
when he
about,
started courting
yeah,
uh, Tilly, my grandma.
yeah. Well, when he set off from North Shields to Marconi's in Liverpool, he said he got there and the next day he was on a ship bound for India. He said he was thrown in the deep end. Anyway, he was on the ships for about 5 years. Thoroughly enjoyed it. He said a lot of the time the ship was tramping. It was a modern ship, but it was going round India in that area, moving goods from A to B. And he said there was plenty fringe benefits you could make because some states that went to expensive or very expensive, if you were in a cheap state, the crews each had big lockers that they could put stuff in. He
Okay.
says there was whiskey and all sorts of things. He says, but I was an officer. He says, from being a non-entity North Shields schoolboy, had a white uniform with shiny buttons, and we all had Indian servants who
Oh
made
my
our beds
goodness.
and did our laundry. And
Right.
we had meals with a big captain at the head and waiters. Anyway, he says, one year he's on leave in Whitley Bay, and North Shields, next to Whitley Bay seaside. He met this girl, Hilda Barron, and he took her out for tea. And he was only there for a fortnight on leave, but they hit it off really well. And he arranged to see her next time he came. The next time they came, they got on well, and he asked her to marry him. And she says, I'm not going to marry a seaman, spend all my life by myself, looking after the house and family father while you're gallivanting around the world. Now, at the time, it was the Great Depression in the Northeast, well, all England, and there wasn't any jobs going. So they used to get the paper every morning for the rest of the leave and to see what jobs there were. He went all over the place. And they finally saw one for policeman in Newcastle. So he said, well, I don't want to be a policeman. She says, well, if it's a job and you don't like it, you can look for another job. And by now he's only got 4 days of his leave left. So he goes up to Newcastle and goes in the front desk and says, right, I want to be a policeman. Said, you've got to fill a form in and wait a fortnight. He says, I'm going to see you in 3 days. I said, oh, well, you can fill it in here and give it to us. So he says, well, can I not do anything else today? She says, no, there's no way you can be a policeman in 3 days anywhere. He says, but I can have the promise of a job in 3 days. She said, yes, but you don't want to go so far as to have to be the chief constable after interviewing. And he was a very clever lad, clever boy then, clever young man. He says, well, I want an appointment to see the chief constable. She said, you're joking. He says, no, I'm not. She says, well, I've got to look at his diary. He's got appointments all day. He says, well, why tomorrow? He says, we're working in his office tomorrow. He says, well, I'll see him tomorrow. She says, no, you won't. I'll send a note.
Yeah.
So he says, I'll come tomorrow morning and see what's happened. So he turned her and he said, if you wait outside, he's got any time, he'll see you.
Right.
So he waited all morning until the
Uh-huh.
afternoon. And eventually the chief constable's secretary came out and said, the chief constable will give you 5 minutes. So he went in and he says, why should I give you a job as a police constable? So
Yeah.
he explained he was going to see. And he says, well, he said, what special gifts can you give me? What are you doing now? He says, I'm a Marconi radio operator. Oh, he said, we're going to get radios on our police cars. Have you got any qualifications? Yes, said Eddie. I've been in this ship and I've got to. And he carried on with his qualifications. He was really well qualified.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
says, right, he says, can you swim? He says, yes. He says, I'll arrange a medical for you. And you've got to get a certificate from somebody at the bath saying you can swim 3 lengths.
Right.
And come back tomorrow evening. If you've got all them, we'll give you a start.
Wow. That is so awesome.
He went to the doctors who said he couldn't see him tomorrow. So he sat there till the doctor came over and said, what are you waiting for? And he explained it all. He says, my life depends upon this. The woman I love is going to marry me for a job. And I need a medical. So the doctor says, oh, come in then. So he got his medical, went in the baths, did his lengths, and he got the job. And he joined Newcastle Police Force as a constable. And in those days, nobody had cars. But one of Marshal Barron, his father's hobby was cars. He
Oh,
always had a
okay.
car. And then he used to drive the cars. So he could drive. So within the first few months, he was driving police cars and helping to install the radios.
Oh,
So he
is
had
that
a
right,
really,
Dad? You're getting
really
carried
good
away. This
start.
is totally
Yeah.
awesome, but I think we're kind of verging on another episode.
Right.
So this 2 week period, he's managed to sort himself a job. He's managed to
Yeah.
propose. So does he go and see Marshall and kind of get the dad to approve it?
No, he was about 26 then. He never contacted. We only was in touch with his family.
Right.
His father realised he's lost his power over him. The rest of them were still under the thumb.
Okay. So Dad, my grandma, I forgot her name now. Tilly. I forgot her
Well, when
proper
they
name.
first went to the house.
Yes. Say,
Yeah.
yeah. Granddad did take him along, take her along to see his dad.
Yeah.
To tell us about that.
Yeah, he said, I wanted to see my dad. He's against us having any relationships with anybody else. So he might be a bit brusque with you. So she says, okay, I don't care. So they went to North Shields and went in the house, and it was middle of winter, and it was freezing cold. And there was a little coal fire in the living room. And she said there was about little lumps of coal on and a bit of a glow. And next to it was a scuttle full of coal. And they were talking, and the father's going in and out. And she got so cold, she got the tongs and put a piece of coal on the fire. And then the father-in-law came in and said, who put that bloody piece of coal on the fire? And then he said, well, it was Hilda. She had no right, that's my fire, this is my house. She's not running this house. So Hilda said, I'm going home, Eddie. Where's my coat? And she says, I'll never come in this house again while he's alive. And she never did.
So she was a sassy woman. She
She
was.
she wouldn't be bossed around like the girls.
That's excellent. And the really the really amazing thing about that story is that he spent every day of his life shoveling coal, and he was.
Yes.
So anyway, let's move on. So jumping decades. Uh, you followed Eddie down to Hatfield. We're missing out an awful lot of stories here, and you ended up living. You and Val, you're married to my mother then, living with him when I was born. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Now, from his time in the police, Eddie, who was already an excellent driver, kind of majored on that, and he did advanced driving tests, and he was very, very proud of his driving skills. So, to tell me of the time
Oh, well, I know what you're going
when
to say.
you kind of showed him up a bit by accident.
Well, there's two things which will stick in my memory. He was a very good driver.
Yeah.
He'd done courses with as a police driver, and he'd done when he left the police, he went on these super courses to be an expert. It was good for his insurance actually, but he was good, and he loved his cars. His Hilda, his mother, his wife, said he loved his cars before her. Never mind. One day, well, you were living at Hemel Hempstead, and Tilly, my mother-in-law, said, "I want to go shopping." And he said, "Oh, I'm too busy to take you at the moment." And I've learned to drive recently. I said, "I'll take you, Hilda." She says, "Okay, that's going to take me." And I knew she was a nervous passenger. And Eddie was a very good driver, but he did drive fast. So I drove into Stevenage and Hemel It's only about 3 miles. But I changed gear effortlessly, slowly, braked gently, no jaws, no shaking, no whizzing, nothing. And both sides, when we got back, we went into the house and Eddie's there. And she says, "Matt's a lot better driver than you." That was the worst thing anybody could have said to him. They could have accused him of being a thief or a murderer. He would have shrugged that off. But he loved his cars, and he had a new car every 2 years.
So it took him a while to forgive you for that, did
He
it?
did, yeah. But the next time, he always used to, when a new car came out, it used to be a thing then. He used to have a year letter, and people would queue up during the night to have
Okay,
a new car
right.
with a
To be
new
on the
letter
news
on.
and stuff, yeah.
And he never queued still at night, but he would have an early one. He'd have a car the first day of the new letter. And it was when the Hillman Imp came out.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
the local garage, he was outside 6 o'clock in the morning, get his Hillman Imp, and he got it and he had his things on. Did a roll around and said to the garage it was fine. And they said, "Right, it's yours." Off he set. And we lived half a mile away from the garage. And he came round to show it to us. And he came into the drive. He wasn't quite used to the pedals, and instead of pressing the brake, he hit the accelerator and rammed into the wall of the house.
No. Whoops.
Stove in the front of the cons, smashed the headlights and passed them back. And I had to ring the garage up to come and take it. And then he set a record for the shortest period of time for a new car to leave the garage and come back.
So I can imagine
He didn't
that.
like to be reminded of that.
I can imagine that hurt his pride rather a bit then. So I'm now going
It did
to
hurt his
zip
pride.
you back to uh, and talk about Eddie's brother, Robbie, uh, because he didn't manage to escape from his
Yeah.
father's stern overseeing.
Yeah.
Uh, so can you tell us
Yeah.
a little tale about Robbie?
Yeah, Robbie was under the thumb as well, as were the girls. And he wasn't allowed to go to dances or pictures and all that. But because his father had a car, he learned to drive. And years later, when we moved to Hatfield, he decided to bring his sisters down to see us. But he was never did many miles. He never
Mm,
used to go to work because he had to cross the Tyne. He would have to put on a ferry, and it was only about a mile and a half away.
yeah, yeah.
The only trips he did was Brampton near Carlisle, about 3 hours. He would probably average 6 or 7,000 miles a year. Never been on a motorway before, a big one.
Yeah, yeah.
So he came down to Hatfield, down the A1M, and loved it. And one day we had to go up north to Stevenage. And Eddie says, well, come on, we'll go to Stevenage. And Robbie says, oh, we'll use my car. So I said, yeah, we'll get in the back. And I got in the front, actually, and off we set.
So was it true it was a bit short-sighted as well?
He had big, thick glasses, and he used to lean forward with his chin about 6 inches from the windscreen. So off we set, and 30 mile an hour was when he was up to 50 before we hit the motorway. And a horrendous rainstorm came, and you
Right.
couldn't see through the windscreen.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's doing 75 miles an hour. And I'm saying, slow down, you can't see, you can't see. And Eddie's saying, I can't see on the map. Stop, for Christ's sake, get your foot off the pedal. And eventually he did. And when we got there, Eddie says, I'm driving this car back, and put him in his back seat. And Eddie drove the car back.
So, so you told me earlier a quite touching story that Robbie did have a little escape from that
Oh,
rather
he did,
constrictive
yeah.
background. Tell us about that.
There was a time when the father was getting really bad. His elder sister was engaged to be married, and the father broke that engagement up.
Oh my goodness.
And it caused a family row, and Eddie was upset. Robbie was upset. And there used to be a big circus, famous circus. Bertrand Mills used to tour England and used to come to Newcastle Town Moor. Great big circus. And everyone used to go. And Robbie went there one day, and he got chatting to one of the guys. And he says, what's it like being in the circus? He said, oh, it's great to get around, see all the country. He said, why? He said, well, I'm fed up with the job I'm doing. As a plumber on the shipyards. He says, can you drive? He said, yeah. Because in them days, this is before the war, very few people could drive.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, well, I'm going to drive it. Come and see the boss. So I went and saw the boss, and the bloke says, well, do you think you could drive a lorry? We'll give you a bit of practice. Yes, he said. So for the next 3 or 4 years, he
Wow.
was with Bertrand Mills, touring England. He says it was hard work, but it was enjoyable. Living in a caravan, yeah, I helped erect the tents and unpack the stores and help with the animals. And it was great. But his dad kept writing him letters saying, I'm upset we missed it and all that, but please come back home. So he went back home eventually and settled in among the tyrannical dad.
Okay, so that is beautiful. So just to keep everyone confused, we're now going to jump forward again to when I was a little boy, and yes,
Oh, we
yes.
used to
So
visit them.
so Tilly's sisters, they sounded quite interesting. Tell us about
Yeah.
the visits.
Well, you'd be 5 or 6 and Don would just be 3 or 4.
Yeah,
And when we went to Newcastle, we always had to go and see them. And Robbie was dead then with just the sisters.
yeah.
And we used to have tea. And I swear blind, they used to lay the stuff out with rulers to make sure the distance were exactly the same. And there was napkins that you had to put on, and the boys had to put the napkins on, and then the food was served. And there was special teapots and special cups. And if you wanted another cup of tea, you had to ask, can I have another cup of tea, please? And had a pot where to get a water and empty the tea leaves and the tea in the whole cup into the pot. Come and pour you a new cup. And boys are boys, even I drop crumbs on the table. They would keep getting up with a little brush and pan and saying, oh, you're making a mess there. And brush the crumbs into the pan and go and put a special bucket in the middle and ask questions. Have you been to church today? No. Oh, you should
Oh,
go to
so
church. Have you been to Sunday school? Why don't you go to Sunday school? You'd like Sunday school. And eventually, we know better. If I made crumbs, they came and dusted my crumbs as well. And on the way home that day, Michael, the elder, said, I don't want to go there for tea anymore. And I said, neither do I. And Bob says, well, that makes a lot of us, so we never went back again.
so this is fascinating, Dan, because I don't think I've ever heard that story before. But I've read that your character is pretty much formed by age 12, and it probably explains why I've never been that keen on visiting relatives. It's kind of something very deep inside. So let's finish with a rather touching story about Eddie, who was a proud man, but Eddie and his garden ornament. I thought that's quite nice. This is when you and Val were living with
Yeah,
Eddie in Hatfield before you got your own house,
yeah.
and I was a baby screaming and doing what babies do.
Yeah, when he moved to Hatfield, he bought a house. It had been the house of someone quite high up in de Havilland's aircraft company. Beautiful house with a
Mm,
magnificent lawn. It had been prepared and maintained by experts. There was more than 200 rose bushes around the outside.
wow.
The lawn was about 50 foot long by 20 feet wide. It was perfect, okay, a green carpet. And at the top was a fountain and a little statuette of a cavalier with a sword and a little pool, about 4 foot across, about 6 inches deep. And he loved that. He would love to, used to bring people from work to show them it. And one day I was coming in and Hilda, my mother-in-law, says, look out the window of the garden, see if you can notice anything. Look out, I can't see it. She says, what's the fountain doing? I said, my God, it's gone. What's happened? She says, Eddie came with these builders and said, I would never forgive myself if my first grandson tripped and fell and drowned in that thing because I was so proud of it. I wouldn't take it out. Water and kiddies don't miss like that. And that was one of the nicest things he ever did. It showed that he had a heart and
It does.
he loved his children. Yeah.
Yes, and I was always welcome there. It wasn't like you described with his headmistress sister, and we used to
Oh
play
no.
bridge and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to finish
It was, yeah.
on a
There's
high.
only
So,
one story about Eddie.
oh, go on
He
then.
told me, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
When he was a policeman and he was trying, you all had to go on the beat. And that's walking the streets in them days. And they had no telephones. It was police boxes. And every beat would have one or two. And
yeah.
when you came to it, you had to come in case there was a call for you. You'd ring up the centre station and they would say, oh, do this. So he's on his first beat the first morning, gets about 12 o'clock, called in a few times. And it's a place in Newcastle called Biker. And he called in and said, oh, there's a fight in the, I think they call the Farmer's Arms pub. It's only about 600 yards from where you are. Go and sort it out. The manager's complained. So he went down there and he heard crashes and banging and people standing outside and he thought, oh God. And he was a big, well-built man, so he could look after himself. He went inside and there was this guy there about 6 foot and he was thumping two men who were coming in. He was knocking them down one by one and kicking them and all sorts. So Eddie rushed and got a
Oh my
hold of him
goodness.
and he swung and he hit Eddie and they started a fight. And he said he was so powerful. He said his blows were really hurting. And he forced me out to the pub through the front door. We can't fight outside. And then he hit me such a whack, I lost consciousness.
So I
Well,
guess in those days, if I don't know whether this chap was a coal miner, but if they were really fit and
yeah,
really
well,
strong, weren't they?
the sting is in the tail
Ah, go on then.
because he had to go to hospital, have his nose fixed. And one of the policemen came and see he was all right. And he says, well, you should have more sense than to take the dummy on yourself. He says, what do you mean? He said, did they not tell you it was the dummy causing the trouble? He says, no. He says, oh, he said, whenever he says he gets so many beers, he gets drunk and he fights. Whenever he starts to break a place up, we send 3 or 4 constables in with our batons. He says he's one of the best fighters in the world. He says, you know, that's your novice. He said, that's your experience. He says, I think it's funny to do that, he said. And I thought that was rather hard.
So that's a little prank for the beginners that seems to be pretty prevalent in those days. So, ouch, that
Yeah,
must have hurt.
yeah,
But he lived
yeah.
to tell the tale, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Okay, Dad, do you want to say goodbye
So
to
is that the
everybody? We'll
end of
finish
Eddie?
up now.
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone. See you next
All
time.
right, all right, bye.